The first time you notice it, it feels like coincidence. A promotion you were sure was yours quietly goes to someone else. A conversation shifts, and suddenly you're agreeing to something you never planned to say yes to. A door closes without a sound, and you can't quite explain why it happened or how you missed the moment it slipped away. Life keeps moving. People keep smiling. And yet there's this faint sense that an invisible hand is guiding outcomes behind the curtain, shaping winners and losers while pretending not to exist. Tonight isn't about paranoia or conspiracy. It's about awareness. Because whether you realize it or not, there are ancient rules at work right now, old as power itself, silently influencing how people treat you, what opportunities come your way, and how far you're allowed to climb before gravity suddenly remembers your name. Imagine Florence in the early 16th century. The streets are narrow, the air smells of ink and stone, and power changes hands not with applause, but with whispers. In a small room lit by oil lamps, a man sits alone, exiled from politics, stripped of influence, writing not to flatter kings, but to expose them. Niccolò Machiavelli wasn't trying to create villains. He was trying to describe reality as it actually functioned when the masks came off. His words weren't instructions so much as confessions, observations of how humans behave when survival, status, and dominance are on the line. Centuries later, the costumes have changed. The palaces are now offices, social feeds, classrooms, and relationships. But the rules never left. They just learned how to hide. One of the first things you learn, if you watch people closely enough, is that power doesn't reward brilliance the way fairy tales promised it would. It rewards perception. The person who rises fastest is rarely the most capable. They're the one who understands how to manage the emotional temperature of the room. They know when to speak and when to let silence do the work for them. They never outshine the people above them in ways that cause insecurity, because they understand a truth most of us learn too late. No one likes to feel eclipsed, especially by someone they believe should be beneath them. So they shine just enough, carefully angling their light so it reflects upward, making those in control feel bigger, smarter, safer. You may have felt this without naming it, that subtle pressure to dim yourself or exaggerate admiration just to keep the peace. That's not weakness. It's a recognition of how fragile authority really is. As you move through life, another pattern emerges, one that feels almost cruel in its consistency. People are far more loyal to their interests than to their words. Promises are emotional currency, spent generously when nothing is at stake, and retracted the moment circumstances change. This doesn't mean everyone is dishonest. It means most people are human. They remember how you make them feel, not what you sacrificed. They respond to incentives, not ideals. And the ones who understand this don't waste time arguing about fairness. They position themselves so that keeping them around becomes convenient, even beneficial. If you've ever wondered why some individuals are always protected, always excused, it's often because removing them would cost more than tolerating them. Power protects what it needs, not what it loves. There's a strange paradox that unfolds once you see it. The more you openly chase attention, the less authority you seem to have. The people who command rooms effortlessly often do so by appearing slightly unavailable, slightly detached, as if their time and energy belong elsewhere. Mystery isn't about being cold. It's about resisting the urge to explain yourself to everyone. When you reveal everything, when you narrate every decision and emotion, you remove the space where curiosity lives. And curiosity is a form of power. It pulls people toward you. It makes them project meaning onto your silence. In a world obsessed with oversharing, restraint has become rare, and rarity always carries value. Think back to moments when conflict erupted unexpectedly. A disagreement that escalated faster than it should have, a reaction that felt disproportionate, almost theatrical. Often, what you're witnessing isn't about the issue at hand, but about control. Humans have an instinctive fear of appearing weak, and when that fear is triggered, reason steps aside. The ones who understand this don't confront directly unless they're certain they can win. They choose their battles with precision, allowing others to exhaust themselves while they conserve energy. Sometimes the smartest move isn't to prove you're right, but to let someone else reveal who they are when they feel threatened. Time, when used intentionally, becomes an ally. There's also the uncomfortable reality that absence can be more powerful than presence. When you're always available, always accommodating, you become part of the background noise of someone's life. Predictable, safe, easily postponed. But when your presence has weight, when it's felt more than it's seen, people recalibrate. They notice. They adjust their behavior. This isn't about manipulation. It's about boundaries. About teaching others how to treat you by what you tolerate and what you don't. Power often grows not from what you do, but from what you refuse to do anymore. At some point, everyone learns that appearances are not optional. You can be authentic, kind, intelligent, and still be ignored if you don't understand how you're perceived. The world reacts first to symbols, then to substance. Clothing, posture, tone of voice, timing, all of it communicates before your words ever land. This is why two people can say the same thing and receive completely different reactions. One is heard as confident, the other as arrogant. One is seen as passionate, the other as unstable. Those who grasp this don't complain about being misunderstood. They adjust the signal. They don't change who they are at the core, but they package it in a way the world is willing to accept. As influence grows, so does resistance. Envy is quieter than hatred, but far more dangerous. It smiles, it applauds, it waits. People don't always resent you for being cruel. They resent you for being ahead. For embodying a future they secretly want, but don't believe they can reach. That's why the wisest players deflect credit, share victories strategically, and let others feel included in their ascent. They understand that enemies don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they offer help. And then there's the law no one likes to talk about, the one that feels almost immoral to acknowledge. Morality is often flexible when survival is threatened. People justify actions they would condemn in others, reframing betrayal as necessity, cruelty as strength. This doesn't mean you must abandon your values to navigate the world. It means you must recognize when others already have. Idealism without awareness becomes vulnerability. Ethics without context become blind spots. The goal isn't to become ruthless, it's to become conscious. What Machiavelli understood, and what still unsettles us today, is that power doesn't operate on how things should be, but on how they are. Ignoring that doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you exposed. The laws shaping your life aren't written on walls or enforced by courts. They're enforced socially, psychologically, invisibly. They determine who gets listened to, who gets overlooked, who rises, and who is quietly pushed aside with polite excuses. The unsettling part isn't that these laws exist. It's that most people obey them without ever knowing their names. They feel the effects and blame themselves, wondering why effort wasn't enough, why honesty didn't protect them, why loyalty wasn't returned. Awareness doesn't turn you into a puppet master. It gives you choice. Choice to respond instead of react. Choice to step back and see the board instead of staring at a single piece. Choice to stop being surprised by outcomes that were always predictable. And once you see the patterns, once the fog lifts just enough, you start to notice how often power reveals itself in the smallest moments. A pause before a reply. A smile held half a second too long. An invitation that doesn't come. These are not random. They're signals. And learning to read them doesn't make life colder. It makes it clearer. Because the truth is that these laws have always controlled lives. The only question is whether they control yours from the shadows, or whether you finally turn around and look them in the eye. Once you start looking directly at them, something unexpected happens. The world doesn't suddenly become darker or more hostile. It becomes sharper, more legible, like adjusting the focus on a camera lens that had been slightly off your entire life. You realize that many of the moments you once labeled as bad luck or personal failure were actually collisions with rules you didn't know you were playing by. And with that realization comes a quiet kind of power, not the loud, chest-thumping kind, but the calm awareness of someone who understands the terrain before taking another step. There's a reason some people seem untouchable, even when they make mistakes that would destroy others. They understand how to control the story around them, not through lies necessarily, but through framing. They speak first when something goes wrong, setting the emotional tone before anyone else can. They admit small faults to distract from larger ones. They redirect attention subtly, guiding the spotlight where it does the least damage. Humans don't process reality objectively. We process narratives. Whoever controls the narrative controls memory, and memory decides reputation. This is why silence at the wrong moment can be fatal, and why over-explaining can sound like guilt even when none exists. You may have noticed how quickly people assign roles without ever discussing them. Leader, supporter, threat, afterthought. These roles aren't chosen. They're inferred. And once assigned, they're incredibly hard to escape unless something dramatic interrupts the pattern. Those who understand this don't wait to be placed. They arrive already occupying space, already behaving as if the role they want is theirs by default. It's not arrogance, it's expectation. Humans are remarkably compliant with expectations, especially confident ones. If you treat yourself as optional, the world agrees. If you move as though your presence matters, people adjust around you, often without realizing why. One of the most uncomfortable truths is how often people confuse kindness with weakness, not because kindness is weak, but because it's frequently unprotected. The individuals who last don't abandon kindness. They anchor it to strength. They make it clear that generosity is a choice, not an obligation. That warmth can be withdrawn. Boundaries, when enforced calmly and consistently, create respect faster than endless accommodation ever could. This is why some of the most respected figures are also the most composed. They don't explode. They don't beg. They simply stop engaging where they're not valued, and that absence sends a message louder than confrontation ever could. There's a rhythm to influence that feels almost musical when you notice it. Advance, pause, speak, listen, reveal, conceal. People who rush every moment, who push constantly without reading the room, burn out, or get pushed out. Those who understand timing feel almost lucky, as if doors open naturally for them. But it isn't luck. It's patience paired with observation. They wait until emotions peak, until tension is ripe, until attention is already focused, and then they move. One well-timed action outweighs 100 frantic ones. Fear plays a role too, though it rarely announces itself as fear. It disguises itself as urgency, aggression, overconfidence. When someone feels their position slipping, they become unpredictable. This is why provoking insecurity in powerful people is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But it's also why calmness under pressure is so disarming. When everyone expects panic and you offer steadiness, you invert the dynamic. You become the anchor. And people gravitate toward anchors when the ground feels unstable. Another quiet law reveals itself in relationships of all kinds. People value what they struggle to obtain more than what is freely given. This isn't romantic or fair, but it is consistent. Effort creates investment. Investment creates attachment. This is why doing everything for someone doesn't guarantee loyalty. Sometimes it guarantees indifference. Those who understand this don't overextend in the hope of being appreciated. They allow others to meet them halfway. They let effort flow in both directions, knowing that imbalance breeds either resentment or neglect. As awareness deepens, you may feel a strange tension inside yourself. Part of you wants to reject these ideas, to believe that sincerity alone should be enough, and it should be in a better world. But another part of you recognizes the relief that comes from finally understanding why certain patterns keep repeating. This isn't about becoming manipulative. It's about becoming literate in the language power speaks, so you're no longer misled by its silence. Machiavelli wasn't admired because he was cynical. He was remembered because he was honest. He looked at human behavior without flinching and wrote what he saw, not what he wished were true. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign that these laws are wrong. It's a sign that they're accurate. Reality rarely asks for permission before revealing itself. And here's the part most people never reach. Once you understand these rules, you don't have to use them aggressively. Awareness alone changes your posture, your tone, your decisions. You stop oversharing with those who haven't earned trust. You stop fighting battles that only exist to drain you. You stop mistaking chaos for passion and stability for boredom. You choose your alliances carefully. You listen more than you speak. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the way people respond to you shifts. Power stops feeling like something external, something others hoard while you wait your turn. It becomes situational, fluid, responsive, something you can step into or away from, depending on the moment. You realize that control isn't about dominating others. It's about not being dominated by ignorance. By the time most people realize these laws exist, they've already paid the price for ignoring them. Relationships lost. Opportunities missed. Trust misplaced. But awareness doesn't erase the past. It reshapes the future. From this point on, every interaction carries a little more clarity. Every decision is informed by understanding rather than hope alone. And maybe that's the real secret. Not that these laws control your life, but that once you see them, they no longer have to. Then let's wind it down, not with a lesson, but with a moment. Imagine standing at the edge of your own life for a second, looking back at it the way a filmmaker studies the final cut of a movie. The conversations that changed everything. The chances you sensed but didn't take. The people who rose faster than you, and the ones who quietly disappeared. None of it feels random anymore. Patterns emerge. Motives sharpen. You start to see that beneath every dramatic turning point, there was usually something small and invisible guiding it a tone, a pause, a choice to speak or stay silent, to push or to wait. The unsettling thing about Machiavellian laws isn't that they exist. It's that they've been operating whether you consented to them or not. They were there when you trusted too quickly, when you assumed effort would be noticed automatically, when you believed clarity alone would protect you from misinterpretation. They were there when you thought power looked like confidence, when often it looked more like restraint. And they'll continue to be there tomorrow, in meetings, friendships, negotiations, and moments that seem too ordinary to matter until later, when you realize they mattered more than anything else. But here's where the story turns hopeful instead of cynical. Once you see these forces clearly, you're no longer a passive character reacting to plot twists written by someone else. You become aware of timing, of perception, of the quiet gravity your actions carry. You don't need to harden your heart or abandon your values. You just stop confusing honesty with exposure, kindness with self-erasure, and patience with weakness. You learn when to step forward and when to let silence speak. You learn that not every truth needs to be shared, not every fight needs to be fought, and not every open door is meant to be walked through. Power in the end isn't about controlling people. It's about understanding human nature well enough that it no longer surprises you. It's about moving through the world awake instead of sleepwalking, intentional instead of reactive. The moment awareness replaces innocence, life doesn't lose its meaning. It gains depth. You stop asking why things happen to you and start noticing how they happen around you. Machiavelli never promised comfort. He offered clarity. And clarity, while uncomfortable at first, is the beginning of freedom. Because when you understand the rules of the game, you can choose how to play, or whether to play at all. So the next time something feels off, the next time a smile lingers too long, or an opportunity quietly slips away, pause. Observe. Remember that unseen forces don't disappear when ignored. They disappear when understood. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest power you gain from knowing these laws isn't influence over others, but control over yourself. That's where the real story ends, where the real